you all want to read any poetry? If so, here's the sign-up sheet.
Here.
So I don't have to keep on talking. And the other idea about this is that this little pamphlet has some of the bios. These freedom fighters, liberation movement people have long stories, and we did our best to make them true to the spirit. So I'd like to ask Lilia Rosas to open up our reading.
I'm reading Raúl's work. So this one is La Peste Arrive, and Raúl always has epigraphs. So it's called, right before the poem starts, he writes, "Silence equals death." This time, unlike the others, the assassin was unknown to us. Sneaking into our world like a sniper came the killer disease, gunned you down in the fashion of Uzis and drive-bys. Speaking death to your breath, homegrown, homeboy, active estudiante, inevitable teacher, reaching with the rest for the realization of a world just insane. It assaulted you violently, like those fascists you sought to forever expose. Roses bloomed, a revolutionary red, in your garden that year. Comrade, remembering Kwame, intifada, anger, tears, unceasing work to free the Eagle Man, fearing Cuba's fate, damned the arrogance of the North American blockade. Zapped by radioactive zip guns, fading fast, you laughed at crazy roommate's comment on your stylish laser cut and put someone in perspective for the ride. Headed for the western shores, I went to see you in that sterile sanitarium ward. You smiled in a radiant turtle countenance, and it was time for us to go. Then we almost made a mockery of your death with public, casi penitent mournings, bereavement and trendy New Age tradition. Embittered, I would venerate your memory, not your death. I couldn't bow, nor cry, nor shower you with tears. I cursed and criticized the rest, realizing later that, like me, they were merely learning how to grieve. Austin, Eastside, 1988.
Up next, we have Gilberto Rivera. He's one of our board members of Red Salmon Arts, and he has close ties with Leonard Peltier and also has very close ties with Raúl in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Washington area. They were involved in the fishing rights struggle. So I believe this bio briefly touches on Peltier's work during the fishing rights struggle. So it's a very honor to have Gilberto read some of Leonard's readings tonight, and also very honored to have him because his story wrapped up with the struggles for salmon, and that's where those of you who don't know how a red salmon came to Texas, well, it came via the Chicanos from East Austin out to the Pacific Northwest and coming back to honor the struggles of the indigenous fishing rights out there. So, Gilberto Rivera.
I like the title of our event tonight, Love for Liberation. Before I read one of the poems, Leonard's poems, it reminds me of a very famous saying from a very famous revolutionary who said that at the risk of sounding ridiculous, let me say that all true revolutionaries are guided by true love for their fellow man, and that was Che Guevara. So this works real fine. As was mentioned, Leonard is a good personal friend of mine. We were involved in many struggles, specifically the salmon rights struggle was in the Nisqually Reservation just between Olympia, Washington and Seattle. There were many struggles there, and the last time I saw Leonard, he was headed out of Seattle, going to the reservation that we all know the history of that. So I have missed him a lot. My life is my Sundance. Silence, they say, is the voice of complicity, but silence is impossible. Silence screams. Silence is a message, just as doing nothing is an act. Let who you are ring out and resonate in every word and in every deed. Yes, become who you are. There's no sidestepping your own being or your own responsibility. What you do is who you are. You are your own comeuppance. You become your own message. You are the message. May the Great Spirit make sunrise in your heart. Okahe.
Rohit is a great inspiration, source of inspiration for us right now. On Saturdays, we're bringing together youth from the Gardner Betts Halfway House, and we've been doing a series of workshops for like 3 hours here. So we'll be here for 3 hours working with about 10 young men who are transitioning from detention into the so-called free world. So it's been a very great honor to be working side by side with a true poet. So I like to have Jorge come up.
Yeah.
Work for me.
You all know who Mumia is. I think that we tend to forget that the man had a life before he went to prison. Like you know, all you hear is his voice, this voice that you can't ignore, this voice that reverberates in your brain and your ears and your consciousness and in the marrow of your bones. Whenever you hear this man, whenever you hear the struggles, I think sometimes we think that it's prison that made him that way. And it's not, it's himself, it's his spirit, it's his beliefs, it's his heart who made him like that. And he was like that before he went to prison. And I think that's the way he starts this particular piece. And I'm not familiar with it, so if I stumble, forgive me. I fight against being here, but I am here. While a young reporter for a local NPR affiliate, housing was my beat. In the city, which was the oldest in the United States, there were no shortages of housing issues. For Philadelphia's housing stock seemed in a permanent state of disrepair, especially in those sections of the city where blacks, Puerto Ricans, and poor ethnic whites lived. But which stories shimmer in the rearview mirror of memory, brighter than the rest? Although I reported in several sections of the city, many of those had sunk below the ocean of time. An exception was a rent protest by residents of a dwelling in Southwest Philadelphia, a place I drove by for years, but never entered until it became my job. The exterior was attractive and distinctive, and set apart from its neighbors by the decorative moldings and mortar work, which told of another age of its construction, when builders were artisans. It took time not merely to build, but to make the building beautiful. When I got a call from a contact of the impending strike, I rushed out there and finally entered the building. The conditions therein made me gasp. Ceilings were dangerously drooping over children's living quarters. Plumbing was backed up, and the general conditions of lack of repair made the building a threat to all of its inhabitants. As I met with the leaders of the strike, their fury was evident. When I think back on the story years later, it dawned on me that housing per se wasn't the issue. Resistance was. That's what gave the story the meaning, for it represented everyday working class people standing up to the injustice of unfair and improper living conditions. Years later, while in the churning swells of the American house of pain, this would be my beat. There are tens of thousands of people in these places, and therefore tens of thousands of stories. I have never had a shortage of them. Sometimes it's the cases which brought a man to this place, and more often than not, the procedures by which this has occurred. Like the making of sausages, the American legal process is a messy and ugly thing when one inspects it closely. I've written of unjust and improper prosecutions, harrowing brutality, stunning institutional boneheadedness, and cruelty that would curdle milk. In 1995, I was institutionally sanctioned for engaging in the business of journalism. It took years of legal wrangling, including sitting in a courtroom for several weeks in shackles so tight that one's ankles were swollen and bleeding, to finally prevail on the principle that the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment protected such activity. But it was well worth the battle. For years, writing a story meant, quite literally, writing a story. With an ink pen on a legal pad, sometimes with a 4-inch long flex pen. This is a pen which has an inner tube of an ink pen, but the shaft is composed of see-through rubber, with a rubber cap on both ends, one allowing the 1/2 centimeter tip to protrude. It has been likened to writing with a wet noodle. 2 of my books were written with these instruments, and then sent out to be typed by friends or editors. The computer age has not dawned on the prison system, at least not in Pennsylvania and in Texas. I am often amused when I receive letters from people who include, quite innocently and helpfully, their email addresses or their websites. For it tells me that they actually think I have a computer here in the cell, or perhaps computer or web access. Not. Not only are there no PCs in here, there are no iPods, no CDs, no cassette tapes, even though cassette-ready tape players are for sale in the prison commissary. We are, for all intents and purposes, dinosaurs who live in another age and another warp and woof of time from the millions who dwell without. Recently, a man named Amin, who won a retrial and acquittal from several unjust murder convictions, was ordered released after almost 2 decades on death row. He left the county prison in Philadelphia with all his earthly possessions in a trash bag and a bus token. A local county prisoner, a Puerto Rican brother, released at the same time, saw the look of loss on his face and offered him a cell phone. Amin squinted at the machine, tiny in his fist, and asked, "What do I do with this?" He had absolutely no idea how to operate this strange thing, for he had never seen or held one before. He later told me, "Man, it looked like something straight out of Star Trek." Sometimes stories come unbidden and unwanted. Several months ago, a funny and well-liked jailhouse lawyer on the road named Bill Tilley, tired from his years of butting his head against the gray judicial walls and fearful that his emergent health problems were a prelude to cancer, got up early in the morning, used his laces from his sneakers, and fashioned a noose by threading them through the steel grate mesh of the air vents into the cell. He hung himself. After his passing, the scuttlebutt was that he did indeed have cancer. But medical staff did not disclose this fact, for as a death row prisoner, the state would not waste money on such a patient who was going to die anyway. Several weeks before his death, Tilly confided to a few friends that he suspected it was cancer, given the severity of the symptoms. But whether it was or not, it was so painful that he remarked, "I don't ever want to go through that again." What we didn't know was that he was telling us, in the only way he could, of his suicide plans back then. Perhaps he was saying, in so many words, that he didn't fear death, but that he did fear pain. His death took place less than 35 feet from the cell door in which these words are written. I broke the story, but it gave me no pleasure. There are tens of thousands of stories in this house of pain, and I have written hundreds of them. This is my hidden beat, one that even the most intrepid of journalists cannot enter. Yet it is my beat, and I intend to do this job with the same thoroughness, the same professionalism as I did in days of yore. For though it is a hidden world, one not seen by millions, it is too a public world, for it is bought and paid for with the tax dollars of the citizenry. Shouldn't they know what their investments have purchased? Several times a month, in written form or otherwise, as in books of commentaries, I offer this service to the best of my ability. I fight against being here, but I am here. And while here, the beat goes on.
I had the honor of meeting Ramona Africa and also listening to her speak. She was a part of the MOVE organization and part of the group that got bombed by the Philadelphia city. But she said, who are we to think that the federal government of the United States is going to release Mumia Abu-Jamal? We, the people, are going to be the ones to free Mumia. So please check out what's going on with Leonard. Leonard is very ill too and is needing of some drastic support. So we ask you to go to his website and see what they're needing, from phone calls to letter writing, and also these types of just conscious awareness, and to see what more we can do for Leonard and Mumia, and we'll speak to some of the others. So up next, we're going to invite Tanya Rivera, who is also a staff here at Red Salmon Arts. She has come to us for about a year now. We've been working together, and she has been very instrumental in trying to bring a small group of women together who are ex-women prisoners, to develop a support group. From what we know, there's not a lot of support in terms of groups independent of the system or social services. So we're looking to see how we can help ex-women who are recently released from the prison, to see what we can do to help each other. So I'd like to invite Tanya Rivera.
This is a poem by Asata when she was inside the cages. After the bars and the gates and the degradation, what is left? After the lock-ins and the lockouts and the lockups, what is left? I mean, after the chains that get entangled in the gray of one's matter, after the bars that get stuck in the hearts of men and women, what is left? After the tears and disappointments, after the lonely isolation, after the cut wrist and the heavy noose, what is left? I mean, like after the commissary kisses and the get your shit off blues, after the hustlers have been hustled, what is left? After the murder burgers and the goon squads and the tear gas and the bulls and the bullpens and the bullshit, what is left? Like after you know that God can't be trusted, after you know that the shrink is a pusher and the word is a whip and the badge is a bullet, what is left? After you know that the dead are still walking, after you realize that silence is talking, that outside and inside are just an illusion, what is left? I mean, like, where is the sun? Where are her arms and where are her kisses? There are lip prints on my pillow. I am searching. What is left? I mean, like, nothing is standstill and nothing is abstract. The wing of a butterfly can't take flight. The foot on my neck is part of a body. The song that I sing is part of an echo. What is left? I mean, like, love is specific. Is my mind a machine gun? Is my heart a hacksaw? Can I make freedom real? Yeah, what is left? I am at the top and bottom of a lower archy. I am an earth lover from way back. I am in love with losers and laughter. I am in love with freedom and children. Love is my sword and truth is my compass. What is left?
All right, does everyone know who Asata Shakur is?
Yeah,
All
she
right.
got out. She girl smart.
Well, the next political prisoner helped Asata release herself to Cuba. So those of you, we have her autobiography here. I believe there's a class being taught at UT that's selling her book. It's a great big inspiration to us. We take her poetry into the juvenile detention facility, and it's very powerful stuff. So thank you, Tanya. Up next, we have one of our Save Our Youth facilitators, Serena Agabao Thielen. She's a dancer and also an organizer, and we're very honored to have her as part of our crew. She's been helping direct us and focus and just give a lot of love and embraced the young people. So we are very honored to work with her. So I'd like to bring up Sarina Agabal-Thielen. And she'll be reading Marilyn Buck's poetry.
So many of you may know that Marilyn Buck spent years underground supporting the work of the Black Panther Party as well as the Black Liberation Army. And she spent 30-some years in jail and was released in the summer of this year and had 20 days of freedom before she passed on August 3rd. So this is in her memory. And throughout her life, she was a warrior for justice. This is called Bones. Clacking keys announce your presence, a stalker that needs no silence. Your eyes sweep the hall, searching out encounters. My bones tell me who you are. Your eyes sight in on me. You bark my name, an obscenity in your mouth. My eyes meet yours. You recoil. Too late. My bones unearth your history. You press against the corner, the hunter in his blind, listening. Your tongue cuts loose. Buck! You speak Spanish, Buck! An accusation. I know what you're saying. Ana Luz laughs. Es ilegal hablar de la comida. Ah, you speak Spanish, Mr. Kane. One woman wonders if you are Latino. Your black hair, your mustache, your eyes flash. An M16 in shadowed forests. No, no, no. I'm an American, but I've been there. Where, Mr. Kane? Compañeros' bones murmur from beneath tropical forest floors. Sí, estaba acá. Yes, he was here. You hunker in the darkened cell, rifling meager possessions. I stop in the door. You start. Get out! No! Halt! Are those books yours? There's a map. I stand still. Is this a trap? The island where I was, Tiger Island, La Isla de la Tigre. Bones clatter in my chest. You said you were in traffic control. San Salvador, Honduras, an island off El Salvador. Hunter Kane steps from shadows, trophy in his grin. Yes, but not there. Advisor in the countryside, you know. My bones snap. The sound of 223 slap flesh. Jungle boots dance in blood. Yes, I know. Death stench settles on my bones when you stride prison halls. But you do not know. My bones are not mine alone. We are wherever you are. Not always prisoners.
And as she was saying how Marilyn Buck passed away due to cancer, I don't know if it was Mumia, but people talk about being on death row. And being on death row meaning, yeah, the government, the feds are going to put you to death, but also just being in prison for the rest of your life is also a slow death. And one of Raul's friends, comrades who he was incarcerated with, I believe in Leavenworth and Marion, Victor Bono, was just diagnosed with cancer. So it's a very common disease amongst ex-prisoners who've been locked up for a long time, and it's, yeah, sending a lot of energy to Victor Bono. So up next we got Riders Against the Storm. They're going to read a piece by Jalil Muntakim. He is well known in some circles and not known enough in others. So in the middle, there's his story, a really inspiring story, but similar to Mumia and Asata, he was accused of assassination of police officers, more than one, and I believe he is also part of the San Francisco 8. Is he one of the San Francisco 8?
Yes, sir.
And it's got a website you can learn more about the San Francisco 8. But Riders Against the Storm, or RAS, they come to us via the East Coast, and they just been blowing it up all over town. So a lot of people have been checking them out, and we're glad that they agreed to share their spirit with us. So I'd like to bring up Riders Against the Storm.
My wife, who's my partner in rhyme, my partner in crime, is going to come up. She's back there. She's going to come up in the next session. My man, you guys heard of an artist named CeeLo? Yeah, he has a song called Crazy. Y'all heard that? And he said, like, my heroes had the heart to live their lives out on a limb. And all I remember is thinking I want to be like them. And like for me, that like sums up kind of like how I live my life. You know, it's like there's people that tread the way before us that came and they put themselves out there so that we could be inspired, but also to organize us. And those voices, while we know them, people like Mumia, you know, I've met people like Mumia that are like, you know, trapped in a bottle. You know what I'm saying? I've met people that can voice the concerns of our situation in different circumstances. Mumia is an example of just the genius that we have, but also the military, the prison industrial complex that we face, because we know that they're locking up so many of our soldiers. Those that may not be able to necessarily voice like Mumia, but definitely have the ability to organize and the ability to inspire other people through their actions. I was very inspired recently by what happened down in Georgia. I don't know if you guys heard about that, but there was a prison strike, a hunger strike that happened down there. And while we may not know the names of those people as we know Mumia, or as some of us may know Jalil, the struggle still continues and it's alive inside of us. So like my heroes, they're the ones that, you know, aren't afraid to, well, even if they can't speak necessarily, but they're going to do something to live their lives on a limb. And that's how I want to live my life. This is called Obama Mania. So I'm an MC, so like I'm gonna ask for some crowd response, like some crowd response. All right, so I'm gonna say Obama Nation, and y'all gonna say Okay. All right. And then I'm gonna say again, I'm gonna say Obama Nation, y'all gonna say well. Okay. Can we try that? Okay. Obama Nation. Obama Nation. Wow. That's pretty good, but y'all sound happy. It's more like, you know what I'm saying? It's like when you get up in the morning, you gotta do mad stuff, you just like, hey, you know what I'm saying? That type of feeling, you know, and the whale's kind of like, all right, so we try that again. Obama Nation. Obama Nation. Well. I'm not ashamed of you or hating you for your affection for the 44th president. It is obvious in retrospection. It is a universal affliction without contrition to the reality of socio-economic restrictions of the poor and oppressed. The situation requires an address to impress that change will not manifest by simply being professed at press conferences or a cabinet meeting when the greedy continues to exploit and capitalist elation void any hesitation since CEOs have no fear of incrimination. You say, give him time to unwind the stimulus plan while the Republicans continue to make demands to undermine retooling of America. Yet, those in the know knows this is no time to repose when economic woes cascades like Niagara Falls, leaving the lower classes under black and white keffiyeh shawls of malnutrition. They starving for relief that welfare and food stamps can't ease the lack of funds that has undone middle class dreams of prosperity. For clarity, it should be reiterated the stimulus package will result in denial of Barack's dream, prompt the implementation of new economic schemes to ensure the plutocrats continue to govern with Obama as the leader of their team. I only ask that you take note of the pathology of a polymorphous, pertinacious politician, a chameleon of kaleidoscopic proportion, posturing as a people person whose policies are dictated by the highest bidder. A transmitter of the ideals of homogeneity with the proclivity to speak with a silver forked tongue. When all is said and done, the plutocrats will have gotten more money and run. Another multi-billion-dollar bailout from one who may not epitomize the proverbial sellout with a charismatic smile. I'm just proclaiming progressive folks need to keep a watch out all the while, since poor people are hanging on to his words as he gesticulates like a puppeteer with a messiah complex, having no fear, urging genuflection to enhance his presidential career, steering the masses to support him for another 4 years. As a seemingly ubiquitous incestuous system of avarice carnivorously nourished on its own people at the putrid temple of the Federal Reserve Bank, globalization has taken its toll, manufacturing has slowed, the stock market has foretold that conspicuous consumption has closed. Common folks produce the wealth, but have no say in how it is shared. Their lives in disrepair, full of despair, with foreclosures, pink slips, and no way to spare a dime in this climb void of collective survival mode. There is no extol of a humanitarian code that we are all suffering together. So, how can I blame you for falling for a White House color change? Even though the name of the game remains the same, class struggle should now be claimed, but progressive folks take the reins and forge a mass and popular movement, including a national agenda to unpin the capitalist imperialist reign. To demand reparations and redistribution of the wealth, that is a stimulus plan without stealth. Can it be said such a notion is like magic potion that only a social revolution can dispense without suspense by applying a little common sense? Putting the money directly in the hands of the oppressed masses, unfortunately, such idea passes as a socialist. But it is often said if common sense was common, all these fools would have it. Obama mania has claimed you. But can you see the forest beyond the tree? We the people must stand to be free, the land of political leeches with their speeches blinding us with rhetoric about unity. I am not splitting hairs, it's just that I care that we learn to share when it comes to our economic affairs. Damn, the politicians with their flair, because it makes no difference when they don't dare to hold capitalist institutions accountable. Mass mobilization, general strikes taking the fight to D.C., demanding the ending of imperialist wars from sea to shining seas, for public ownership of the means of production that will cause a reduction in capitalist greed. For big agribusinesses, the building of cooperative farming like Victory Gardens would be alarming. Bartering and trading, no longer delaying our collective voices, must be heard. If market forces and consumer spending is the engine of this machine, then the people must take control and reclaim their revolutionary souls like in the laws of the natural order of things. Obama Nation. Obama Nation.
Yeah, I've known Raul for many years. You know, I used to run into him on the streets of San Francisco. I said, Raul! So it was weird. And I'd come here and visit him. That was, many years ago. Okay, the title of by Marilyn Buck, I really wanted to read a couple of hers in honor of her death. You know. The first one's very short, but the title is long. The title, Remembering a 15-year-old Palestinian woman in prison chained to the bed springs she had refused to stop singing. Chained for singing clear minor notes, welling from sweet young throats and mouths which have tasted the tightness of screaming silences, and still songs soar skyward. Reeling, remembering, revealing. Women sing songs, reeling, remembering, revealing. Lullabies, love songs, blues songs, chants, cantillating songs of exiled lives and martyrs' death. Voices search out sounds not yet noted on bars, not yet ordered on scales. They respond through Zionist hell, demanding Palestine be free. This next one, Confessions Before the Orchestra. Photographs. Wounded man wired, naked men in piles, torture nightmares in daylight. Zombie people stalk the earth, crushed bones, restless and numb. Where to flee? The torturer lives next door. Wears guard gear, stand-ins for shades and civilian clothes. The press spits on Geneva. I don't need you, bitch. Don't hang on me. Don't beg. I do what I want. Call me Captain America. Tortured and maimed, buried in hidden cells, American jails, can't call anyone. Tongues tripped, wired into confession, lie dried in red ink, manufactured consent, plucked out like eyeballs, electrical persuasion, cattle prods, and dogs, raped, no sleep, disorientation, humiliation. Tell me what I did. Whatever you say I did, I did. Guilty, guilty. Symphonic guilts composed by scholars, orchestrated by SOA professors, played by intelligent musicians on homebodies and world bodies. Captain America's death dirge tortures justice.
It's you know, you don't write poetry, man. You know, poetry just comes out of you sometimes. I honestly believe that. And you know, Egypt is in the news, it's in your hearts, it's wherever right now. So was this place, and when I actually thought about this when I got the first email from you. And it's just weird how the last 2 days have kind of brought this together. Things you bring to a revolution. You need a gun. But must it be a chrome-plated, automated bringer of death? Its calibrated sights a crosshair on the torso of being and breath. Its muzzle dipped in the savage sanctity of ashes and fire. Or can it be a song? A single song repeating the dear possibility of love. 100 songs overcoming the machinery of the madmen. 1,000,000 roaring songs demanding a bonfire of the rifles. A conflagration of the tanks. 1,000,000 hymns signaling the beginning of hope. You need a bullet. But must it be a silver-jacketed sliver of steel, shoved into a greedy, smoking bracket, whose only aim, intent, and design is to pierce and shred, to tumble and whine until it lies exhausted and spent, intact in its murderous grit, in skull and bone and spine? Or can it be a voice? 100 voices raised in the rhythm of a chant that will not end. 1,000 voices howling over the hurricane. 1,000,000 voices hushed by the sight of a single human who will not take her seat, who will not bow her head, who says no more, not again, this must end. You need blood. But does it have to be a river spilled from the bewildered backs of the campesinos killed as they kneel and pray in the mud? Must it run from the mouths of our mothers, spew from the eyes of our saints, or flow in the streets and the gutters to give our struggle its rosy, rightful glow? Or can it be the liquid force that moves a single heart, 100 hydraulic hearts driving the muscles that clench the fingers that raise the fists that pound the brutal air? And can it be 1,000,000 hearts beating as one, a drum to lift the feet of the weary, heel and toe, heel and toe, a trudge that becomes a dance, that becomes a blinding rush to freedom, a spellbound, headlong, dizzying push for peace?
Y'all heard of Sweet Honey in the Rock?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Our name comes from one of their songs, When You Believe in Freedom. It's called Ella's song. When You Believe in Freedom Cannot Rest. And one of the songs is talking about passing the torch to the youth who have the courage to run against the storm. But I heard ride against the storm, so that's where our name comes from. We came here from Providence, Rhode Island. And yesterday was our 4th year wedding anniversary.
No, I don't know what
We're going to do a song called Resume. How about that?
Yeah, let's do resume.
Y'all get the drift of this one. When I stepped into the room, interviewer looked surprised, grinning all up in my face, barely looked me in my eyes, sat down and asked me why I felt qualified to teach in the school. I smiled and said these lines: ain't no teachers without students, and the youth been overlooked. Don't take no genius or no masters to see what's in these books. Outdated like most of the folks behind the desk think they ain't got to change. Just collecting fat checks to act like babysitters, eating lunch with the rest, complaining about our youth and their lack of interest. I got a PhD in serving whack rappers, making something out of nothing. Economics, got the masters, then flipping quick hustles to make ends meet. Because if we don't hustle, man, we don't eat. I went to college, Ivy League, and barely survived. Came out with honors and a bachelor's. Working 9 to 5 for what? To follow orders and color in the lines. I want youth out of the box, thinking deep about our lives. Your American dream been over glamorified, then his eyes glazed over like a hostess apple pie. Started looking all confused and a little bit scared. Stood up and shook my hand with some tension in the air, but I broke it like a bottle. And this is what I share. Don't need no resume to represent me.
Say what?
Don't need no resume to represent me.
Say what?
Don't need no resume to represent me.
Say what?
Don't need no damn resume to represent me.
I'm not a credit to my race without credit enough to par. Tax deductible, Huxtable, PhD, whipping the car. I said power is peace. People think I am bizarre. Your desires are open to you when your soul is ajar. Sick and tired of impressing people just to get a good job. Is it good? What is the cost? When life is lost, a supervisor, overseer that reports to the boss. There's some people around. Cut your hair, lay it down. Your clothes are colorful. Are you an African clown? I'm a warrior with music that ain't scared to get down. I'm an artist with the harvest whooping soul from the ground. I'm alive while deprived when you can glide and live high. The end is near me. Can you hear me? Kiss and stretch your goodbye. When it blows and it goes at the close of the century, your bank account was full, but your soul was empty. Your resume could never represent me.
Say what?
A resume could never represent me.
Say what?
A resume could never represent me.
Say what?
Don't need no damn resume to represent me.
What is it? What did she just say?
We translated it into Spanish.
What is it?
Pinche resume.
Everybody can understand that shit. What we gonna do? Wanna do speak the truth?
Speak the truth.
Yeah, let's do speak the truth. We can do notebook.
Notebook. What's the notebook? It's fun.
Notebook. It's called notebook. How many of y'all write in your spare time or just for yourself? Maybe you don't ever read it, you write. Well, if you write a lot, you usually have a notebook. If you're like me, then you have about 6 because you're always losing them, or you start writing in one and it slides under the bed, and someone gives you one, and so you got like about six of them. But this one's called Notebook. Live from Austin, this is the livest one, representing Pittsburgh to the fullest. Never said I was the hoodest of a thug even. Cats used to climb my ass cause I liked reading. And I used to draw a lot so I stayed fiending. For a marker to spark a new page in the black book. Stayed on the courts in the summer with a left hook. Knock a tooth out of sucker's mouth just to get took seriously. Hand skills was a must, but Pops never taught me how to put mines up. So I had to play tough just to get looked up. Cause the girls wasn't flirting with a scrawny little punk with glasses and braces that stayed talking jump. Even with eye lump and some ashy knees. Had to keep my head up, tried to make them see. J Bro had skills, but they did sleep. Notebook in my hand with a black Sharpie. Magnum for the tags that I left in the street. For the pleasure, whatever, to keep my mind free. A little notebook to write my rhymes on and then I'm gone. A notebook to write my rhymes on and then I'm gone. A notebook to write my rhymes on and then I'm gone. A notebook to write my rhymes on.
Coupe tap, boule kai, I try, but every day is a struggle just to get by in the blink of an eye. I be low, then be high, up front, then behind, looking fine, looking cute, lose my head, then regroup. Okay, gotta keep it focused, gotta keep it moving, cause my people think it's hopeless and what I am pursuing, but my people going through it on the daily. Sometimes I think I'm lazy cause I'm feel try to crazy, but I can't let it faze me. Too many young queens need direction, respect for the mind, body, soul, and complexion, addressing the perfection that's indeed an investment of the infinite reflection, detecting the infection of the internal. You need a peep what I learned you, my ground and be fertile, my intellect could hurt you, so don't step in my circle if you ain't ready. No, messing with this black woman, you're looking to catch an ass.
A little notebook.
A notebook to write my rhymes on and then I'm gone. A notebook to write my rhymes on and then I'm gone. A notebook to write my rhymes on. RES super fresh, test the mic check. RES come correct, hype the live set. RES hold your breath, get light cause I said we the duo with the nouveau mindset.
I was thinking a lot about remembering because like I mentioned, it's Raul's passing in a couple days, and my grandma passed about a year ago, and then the Trailblazers, these Mexican Americans who've done amazing work in the present and in the past, are being honored in Austin, or have been. And I was at a historical event, a Black History historical event, and there was an elder there who was being honored. She was an artist from Chicago, woodcut. And her name is escaping right now, but she made me laugh because they were listing all her achievements. And the woman who was honoring her is a teacher of mine. And she said, "No, Juliet, that's enough. This is starting to sound like obituary." And I'm done. And I have some words to say. So I think it behooves us all to really honor those of us we love when we have them. I mean, of course, we should always honor them afterwards, but definitely while we have them, because that time may be very short. So with that, I'd like to invite Riders Against the Storm again, and I want to share my story about witnessing them. And it was here, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe it was 3. I believe Carol Metellus, who has hosted Cafe Libre, had invited them. And they hadn't relocated to Austin yet, but they were thinking about it. And it was maybe the summer, maybe the spring, and I was pretty quiet, but it was a gift to have you all here because of the kind of energy to power that you all bring with your words. So they will be reading for the second set.
So I'm reading this piece, kind of echoing what John had to say earlier about the fact that there are so many of us day in and day out who are, fighting for something new, something positive, something powerful, in all of our different ways. And I just want to echo that it comes in a myriad of ways. There are a lot of people who are not necessarily politically astute, but are very politically active in their own way to understand their communities in their own way and activate them in the best ways they know how. And all those people are, countless people. We never hear their voices. And John and I really take to heart being able to expose those voices that never get heard. So it's good that, political prisoners are also constantly putting things out for us to absorb, because their voices are extremely important. So I'm just going to read. My poetry is called My Poetry by Jalil. My poetry is sharpened knives, clipping thorns off roses. My poetry builds bridges over lava flows to step in spring streams. My poetry replaces hate with understanding and puts sugar in kisses. My poetry ravishes and plunders the greedy to feed the needy. My poetry puts the hue in humanity and the conservation in racists and xenophobes. My poetry put the stink in the shit and make you love the stench. My poetry is the bastard son of the hookers that satisfies your husbands and boyfriends and some of your girlfriends. Now you know it is all about love. My poetry is not fairy tales or lullabies or sing-alongs. Nah. It is a rebuke of the ostrich syndrome. A swift kick in the ass to make you stand up straight and take responsibility for your failures, demanding you live your life fully and love completely. Even when I procrastinate to write my poetry puts the puzzle in an enigma like a Rubik's Cube. You have to twist your mind to discover a solution. My poetry put the pan in Dora's box and swallowed to the key and to keep it locked. My poetry has a chip on its shoulder, bigger than the heads of no Mount Rushmore. My poetry is the calm before the storm and the silence in the dark. My poetry is the hypnotist trance and the enlightenment of epiphany. My poetry only asks for your ear to open your mind so your heart will hear my poetry tantalizing your soul. My poetry is my life.
You for a long time now. And she is relentless in that faith about the power of the words, of their words, and putting their words on paper. So thank you, Serena, for all the work you've done.
So I'm going to thank you, Lilia, for saying that. And I'm glad to see so many young people here today, because I know Raul was also very much for the participation of young people. And so I'm going to read 2 shorter poems. Marilyn wrote a lot of different kinds of poetry. She wrote political poems. A lot of her poems reflect the voices and the lives of women around her who she was building with in the prison. And then she also wrote many poems that were reflective about her own pain of being in prison. So these come from that latter set. And she also, in her final years, was working on a book of poetry that actually Red Salmon Press was possibly going to publish. And so hopefully at some point those poems can come out. But I believe she even got a master's in poetry. Like it very much was a part of her life to have this her experience continue on beyond the prison walls. So this is called 13 Springs. Had you planted a tree to fill in the deep well of my absence, that tree would be 13 springs high. High enough to relieve the relentless sun of incarceration. Strong enough to bear the weight of children who might have been born had I not been seized from your life and plunged into this acid-washed crypt of perpetual loss and high-wired vigilance. But there is no tree that stands in my place to harbor birds and changing winds. Perhaps someone will plant a willow, a eucalyptus, or even a redwood, any tree that will, in 13 years more, bear fruit and provide shelter. And the final poem from this chapbook is Rescue the Word. It's also the title of her chapbook. Sacred words are in danger. Fugitives, they seek cover, bury themselves alive. Shamed by the profane purposes they are forced to serve, dressed in lily-white lies. Words are in danger. English only vows to tear out tongues. Exiled witnesses to collective memory and homeland ties. Sacred words are in danger. Trapped, they hang on billboards, Judas goats to conjure deception. Sing them, shout them, teach them, wear them around your neck. Amulets against amnesia.
Next, we're going to have Maria, who's going to honor us with the words Maria Limon, with the words of Mumia. And I had the pleasure of meeting Maria many, 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 many years ago. And
I know, we were just babies, huh?
we were. And Maria has her work to stop the violence against women should also be recognized, because she has been doing that for as long as I know. And she's also been working with prison women. So I think it's a pleasure to have Maria here, because she doesn't get to visit us very often, and to hear her read the words of Mumia. So, gracias, Maria.
Thank you. Would you mind if I did something a little bit different? I was just sitting here just thinking about Mumia not being present and how he's still very presente. So I'm gonna, could I read it from the back and have people not look at me and just imagine Mumia here?
I think that would be wonderful.
Would that be good? Would that be
Yeah.
okay? I was thinking about it.
All right.
Doing that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about him tonight. And this is from a book entitled In Defense of Mumia. And this is a preface. Walking in the shadow of death. Hell is not the Dantean creation of eternal cacophony, marked by fevered screams of the tortured. No, hell is quiet, still, and chilled. I know. I live there. It is a place of mind-robbing sameness, where days are pale echoes of the day before. On a day like every preceding one, I was lost in concentration, my fingers flying in mindless abandon over typewriter keys, writing a motion for a pending plea until my consciousness split to monitor the nearing jangle of keys. The jangle ceased. A moment of silence. A clear throat. Jamal, would you step over to the door? What's up, man? The lieutenant would like to see you. Eyes meet, and in a flash, an odd admixture of sadness and duty reflect. Damn, here it comes. What's up, Lieutenant? Mr. Jamal, your death warrant has just been signed. We're going to handcuff you and strip you down. At least 5 guards, a sergeant, and a lieutenant crowd the blue tiled hallway, their nerves afire. I turned to the bald-headed Buddhist Swami, with whom I spent most of the morning's library period, and asked him to gather my legal material. We'll take care of it, a guard answers. My wrists are shackled. I am escorted by a silent uniformed mob to Phase 2, an area on B-Pod where men under death warrants are placed. Yo, this is Phase 2. 6 cells shielded by plastic and steel cages, with small 5-inch rectangular boxes fitted to the front door of each cell. The boxes are 24-hour remote cameras which monitor each man's every movement. The cells are bare except for a basin toilet unit, a steel bed riveted to the wall, a seat desk arrangement, and a property bin attached to the left wall. The regulation strip search is conducted, leaving a naked man in a cold concrete cell. Every item of clothing taken is not to be returned to the naked man, so guards unprepared for this rare morning warrant scurry to find Phase 2 clothing. On institutional uniforms, a man's name and number are emblazoned. Not so for Phase 2 uniforms, where, presumably, those with a date to die need no names. What's up, cuz, says mine, a tall, bald, and bearded veteran of Phase 2. What's up, mine? How you be, man? Shit. You know how I be, cuz I messed up. Me and you both, huh? Mine is on the 2nd death warrant, and as one of 2 men to have done so, is an authority among the 5 men caged on Phase. The men make small talk among themselves and attempt to chase the cold, constricting demons of fear away as they clutch for the heart. In an odd equation of death, the more talk equals more fear. Small talk amidst the awesome reality of impending death. Approaching death while waiting in an icebox. The small talk diminishes into tiny talk and vanishes in the hush of quiet. The omnipresent air blower rushes, its cooling breath seemingly amplified by the stilled human voices. Body sense whispers that hours have passed since my 9:45 a.m. notice of my new status. I walk an empty cell, my footfalls an echo from the cold concrete walls. So this is what an empty cell looks like. A rustle of white shirts or ranking guards announces the arrival of news. As expected, the white shirt has come to officially inform me of what I and all the others on the block already know. Jamal, your death warrant has been signed. He turns to a white piece of paper and reads, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has signed your death warrant today, effective for the week of August 13, 1995. I have attached a copy of the warrant. The Department of Corrections has set the date of Thursday, August 17th, 1995, to carry out this order at the State Correctional Institution at Rockview. Any questions? The white shirt asks, his blue eyes cool. I'd like to contact my family. Your block sergeant will take care of that, he announces, and with a sharp turn of his heels, he is gone after leaving a Xerox of the death warrant behind. I look at it dumbly, seeing it, but not reading it. Mine breaks me out of my reverie. Hey, Moo. Yeah, mine. Welcome to the club, baby. Shit, pardon me if I don't celebrate. His high nasal laugh careens off walls and plastic plexiglass. I don't particularly feel much like yucking it up, but I remember how men talk to chase their fear, and before long, mine and I are talking into the wee hours of the morning. Walking into memory. It has been over 12 years since I've walked into a county courtroom. 12 years since my banishment to the barren badlands of death row. As I walk into this ancient, ornate, carpeted room, I notice the visages of long dead jurists, their expressions cold and supercilious, all old white men staring down from their framed perches on the wall but seeing nothing. An expectant silence vibrates in the air until a little voice shatters it. I love you, Grandpa! Laughter, and then, tentatively at first, until a little voice shatters it. I love you, Grandpa! Laughter, and then, tentatively at first, until building in confidence and crescendo. A round of applause breaks over the right side of the courtroom, long and sustained. I am stunned by it, and when the thought strikes, I return the clenched fist salute to many who offer this militant affirmation. I see my grandson, a reddish-brown dimpled munchkin, who can barely see over the public rail, and tell him, I love you too, son, as a sweet smile bursts forth like spring sunshine. He is nearing 4, and I have never touched him. I have never seen him without a barrier between us. Yet this child radiates a love so palpable one can swim in it. And all around him, people pulsate with a love, not of the flesh, but of the spirit. Love in a courtroom, a legal arena of death. Justice is just an emotional feeling, counselor, opined Senior Judge Albert F. Sabo, as he denies a stay of execution sought by lead defense counsel Lord Leonard I. Weinglass in the interest of justice. I'm reminded of a lawyer's tale of a trial before a judge who bellowed, this isn't a court of justice, it's a court of law. In this courtroom, where I was sentenced to death, a sense of deja vu oscillates with the ominous present as Albert Sabo unleashes slur after slur at defense counsel. I don't know how you do it up in New York, counsel, but we don't do that in Philadelphia, he quips. He hits several with contempt citations and orders one of my lawyers away from the bench in handcuffs to a jail cell. Rachel Wolkenstein, Esquire, had the temerity to dare question the jurist after one of his summary rulings of exclusion of documentary evidence. She dared to do what defense lawyers are traditionally intimidated from doing in Sabo's courtroom, aggressively defending their clients. In a moment of remembrance, I saw my trial lawyer hit with contempt for daring to follow his client's wishes until a prosecutor begged Judge Sabo to reconsider. In the midst of familial love is the undeniable presence of judicial hatred, for justice is just an emotional feeling. The stay. After days of denying all defense motions and denying subpoenas for over a third of the defense witnesses, Senior Judge Sabo, on the late morning of August 7, 1995, did the unexpected. The aging jurist, unbidden, issued a stay of execution. The shock to the defense was electric. The prosecution seemed unsurprised and subdued. Shock radiates through the courtroom and a scattered round of applause grows in response. Wait a while, interjects Sabo, his voice a mirror of irritation. You might not want to clap when you hear what I'm saying. He then reads the full text of his order, which sets forth a, quote, indefinite stay pending further appeals. The unexpected nature of the ruling coming as it did from a judge not known for such an act, left me guarded, awaiting the worm within the apple, so to speak. I felt like a wave on my back, the breath of relief for my children, grandchildren, the rest of my family and friends. In all of our discussions, counsel didn't expect this decision from the opinionated jurist. With 10 days of life remaining, the stay was admittedly welcome from whatever the source. It does not mean, however, that I am no longer on death row. It means the government still intends to kill me, just on another day. By the stay, I am moved out of the lower depths of the state's hell to a mid-range, from a dungeon to a cage. A cage located out on the boondocks, as far from Philadelphia as is possible, and remain inside the state line. A cage where men are held behind glass and steel. A cage where men await death.
Carry on the tradition. There were black people since the childhood of time who carried it on. In Ghana and Mali and Timbuktu, we carried it on the tradition. We hid in the bush when the slave masters came holding spears, and when the moment was ripe, leaped out and lanced the lifeblood of would-be masters. We carried it on slave ships, hurling ourselves into oceans, slitting the throats of our captors. We took their whips and their ships. Blood flowed in the Atlantic, and it wasn't all ours. We carried it on. Fed Missy arsenic, apple pies, stole the axes from the shed, went and chopped off master's head. We ran, we fought, we organized a railroad, an underground. We carried it on. In newspapers, in meetings, in arguments, and street fights, we carried it on. In tales told to children, in chants and cantatas, and poems and blues songs, and saxophone screams, we carried it on. In classrooms, in churches, in courtrooms, in prisons, we carried it on soapboxes and picket lines, welfare lines, unemployment lines, our lives on the line, we carried it on. In sit-ins and pray-ins and march-ins and die-ins, we carried it on cold Missouri midnights, pitting shotguns against lynch mobs, on burning Brooklyn streets, pitting rocks against rifles, we carried it on. Against water hoses and bulldogs, against nightsticks and bullets, against tanks and tear gas, needles and nooses, bombs and birth control, we carried it on. In Selma and San Juan and Mozambique, Mississippi, in Brazil, and in Boston, we carried it on. Through the lies and the sellouts, the mistakes and the madness, through pain and hunger and frustration, we carried it on. Carried on the tradition, carried a strong tradition, carried a proud tradition, carried a black tradition, carried it on, passed it down to the children, passed it down, carried it on now, carry it on to freedom.
We spent many, many days in Seattle and surrounding reservations fighting for Indian rights, fishing rights, Aboriginal rights. And the struggle that we had was incredible. I was at the University of Washington at the time, and it was during a time of a lot of turmoil throughout the country. And I remember occupations at the administration buildings, Leonard Peltier, Dennis Banks, and all of the famous names that you know were there helping us out, and we helped each other out like brothers. I also remember the last time that I saw him, we were at the Rainier Inn, a bar, having a few beers with Raul. We in there, and Raul was working on a poem at the time, and we would always drive down Rainier Avenue, and you could see Mount Rainier. And that day, Raul remember saying, "Wow, check it out. You couldn't see the peak because of the clouds." and Raul was writing his poem. He says, I think I just got another line. He says, the clouds are making love to Mount Rainier. Because they were just joined together. It was, and every time I drove down, I always looked to see if the clouds and the mountain were making love. So it was a real cool image. The day that Leonard left to join the struggle or continue the struggle of the at Pine Ridge, we had been at the bar, and we had been drinking, and we had gotten, as Jorge says, all of the weapons of freedom. We had food, we had medicine, we had water, we had clothes, blankets, all the things that were needed for the brothers and sisters to continue the occupation. Leonard got in his car. It wouldn't turn on. I'd like to say the story. And it wouldn't turn on. And I said, what's going on? The battery was dead. And we looked around. I said, don't worry. I opened up my hood, took my battery out, gave it to him. I said, well, what about you? He said, don't worry about it. There's a lot of cars in the parking lot. Down the street in the car lot over there, we can liberate something. But you owe me a battery. He said, when I come back. And I'm still waiting for it. And one of the things that really hurts a lot today is that he is serving 2 consecutive life sentences. He is 66 years old today. He will be 97 years old when he comes out. He is very ill. He has, and I'm not sure, but probably cancer. He has, his jaws are deteriorating, the bones, and he's not getting the proper medical attention that he needs. So there's a big campaign, and I only made 20 copies, but some of you got a sheet of paper there that asked for support to write and so forth. But in the pamphlet, there the www.whoisleonardpelder.info is a website that you need to go to. Please write, do whatever you can. Write to him. There's an address for him, and let him know that we're behind him. He says that he's not afraid of dying in prison. The only thing that he fears is not, as one of the poets said earlier, or one of the poems, I think the one that somebody read earlier, that of not being able to see his children and his grandchildren from the side of freedom instead of through bars. So he is very ill, and he says that he doesn't think that he may make it, but if he does, he'll be 97 years old when he comes out. Be 19 in the year 2041. The fight of the Aboriginal people of this country continues today. We in Austin, and East Austin specifically, are fighting that fight right now because of the gentrification that's going on, the destruction of our neighborhoods, the continued shooting and killing of our young men and women by the police state. So the occupiers have never stopped their occupation and continue to try to continue that occupation by what they're doing to us today. So I thank you all for being here. Your presence is liberating. And so with that, I would like to read Leonard's poem called Aboriginal Sin. We each begin in innocence. We all become guilty. In this life, you find yourself guilty of being what you are. Being yourself, that's Aboriginal sin. The worst sin of all. That's a sin you'll never be forgiven for. We Indians are all guilty. Guilty of being ourselves. We're taught that guilt from the day we're born. We learn it well. To each of my brothers and each of my sisters I say, be proud of that guilt. You are guilty only of being innocent, of being yourselves, of being Indian, of being human. Your guilt makes you holy. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you for sharing that cuento, for reminding us that we're more connected than we realize. These are not just folks that you were reading about. These are folks that some of us knew well. And it's important to hear the stories that connect us, that bind us. I'm going to be reading the last poem by Raul. It's from his last book, Indio Trails, which I encourage you all to purchase, not just because it's here, but because people know Trip Through the Minedale, and that's an amazing, amazing piece of work. And they might even know East of the Freeway, which was his second book. But I don't know if a lot of folks know his last book, because it was a collection of writings that maybe took 2 decades in the making, that were his experiences and tribulations while he was on Indian country. I remember watching him toil. Poets are strange creatures, you know, they will, no offense intended, but you all will toil over not just the words, but the letters. You know, and he had a new computer, and he couldn't get the spacing right, and I don't know how many times he had rewritten that poem. But I think it's important to understand that even the most gifted among us, they struggle to put those words out. They were careful. They want to be listened to. So this is Prayer for a Newborn for Hakastavosh, and I'm sorry for mispronouncing the indigenous name. Raccoon, spinning through weeks-long garbage on smoke shop cabin. Front porch brings on good feelings. Blue jays do breakfast by kitchen sink window. Rye bread, today's portion of a meal. Honoring our dead as flying smiles and soaring souls heed heart song for elders and all. For those generations gone before us, for those generations yet unborn, inside, mind, heart, souls, eagle wings, fluttering feathers, medicine man fans, auras in good faith. Some die so others live. That's how it's got to be. All of us must struggle so that someone may be free. Because it's good to be alive. We ask grandpas and grandmas to walk and talk with us. We welcome you, Red Cedar Man. Haua! Squamish, Washington, 1978.
I'd like to ask permission for everyone for just a couple more minutes. We have a colleague who's working out of Arizona who is also in some ways connected with Jalil Mutakim. And he sent us this solidarity statement. Well, our colleague sent it from Jalil. He, on February 8th of this year, wrote a solidarity statement in support of the Egyptian youth uprising from a U.S. political prisoner. So would everyone be willing to listen to this 2-page? I think it's quite analytical of against the tyranny of Jim Crow segregation. Although the civil rights movement in the U.S. is often referred to as a black bourgeoisie revolution challenging segregation laws and policy, it was not until Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, announced the struggle is for black power, did the civil rights movement evolve into a black liberation struggle by young black youth. As a result of the growing militancy of black youth, the federal government, under the auspices of the FBI Counterintelligence Program, COINTELPRO, began to violently suppress the growing militant youth movement. That movement was mostly representative by the Black Panther Party, of whom became the principal target of the FBI COINTEL activities. The FBI employed pernicious actions, including framing them for imprisonment, running them into exile, and assassinations, the government killing Panther members. The Black Panther movement evolved out of the political struggles of the civil rights movement to further demand control of the socio-economic and political institutions controlling the oppressed black community. As of this date, the youth uprising in Egypt more represents the democratic demands of the U.S. civil rights movement under the leadership of Dr. Martin L. King Jr. It was a non-violent determination that operated as an unified front with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Urban League, Congress for Racial Equality, National Association for the Advancements of Colored Peoples, and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, each of which had specific responsibilities in building the civil rights movement. The Egyptian youth movement has yet to evolve into a coordinated leadership of a united front. And because of this weakness, the uprising is being defined and motivated as essentially a struggle for regime change. However, the ideals of demanding democratic freedoms are laudable. The prospects of true democracy to manifest will depend on more than open elections. This is especially true when the U.S. government continues to sponsor the Egyptian government, especially its military. Therefore, any electoral process will result in the choosing of a neo-colonial representative of U.S. interests in the region. Hence, the Egyptian youth uprising will succeed in regime change, cosmetic change in government operations, nominal redistribution of some of the wealth to address the most pressing demands and issues of poverty. These changes will serve to appease unemployed youth and create a facially more representative government. Very similarly, the U.S. civil rights movement succeeded in ending Jim Crow segregation, creating conditions for a more representative government that has led to the election of the first black president. Obviously, the U.S. civil rights movement failed to change the fundamental conditions of oppressed peoples of color when significant economic disparity between blacks and whites. In fact, the economic disparity that existed between blacks and whites during the civil rights movement has been exacerbated by the realignment of wealth continuing to be accumulated by 1% of the American population. The rich are getting richer and the poor are growing in numbers. Ultimately, this means there needs to be a fundamental change with the capitalist system, a system that is being emulated in Egypt, especially by the military's control of major Egyptian industries. With the United States' continued support of the Egyptian military with over $1 billion in subsidies and payments, the present youth uprising has some difficult struggles ahead of them. The dumping of Hosni Mubarak will not end the military's control of the wealth of the country, nor ensure a clear severance of this insidious relationship between the U.S. and the Egyptian military, the true rulers of the nation. Given this reality, a good look at what is happening in Egypt can be characterized as a bourgeoisie democratic movement inspired by Egypt's youth. Although middle class, as a minimum as they are in the Egyptian population, are supportive of the youth seeking regime change, their aspirations will certainly serve to increase the middle class. Because there is no call for the ending of the military's control of major industries, or redistribution of the wealth, or a change of geopolitical allegiance to the United States and Zionist Israel, clearly what is happening in Egypt is not a revolution. What is the potential for revolution. Indeed, if the youth uprising decides to align themselves with those who want to end the U.S. neo-colonial relationship with the Egyptian government, to control the means of production and strengthen support for the independence of Palestine, forging an united front similar to what existed in the United States during the Civil Rights Movement, revolution is possible. Naturally, just as happened in the United States, such a development will expect to confront the full force of the government, police, and military to suppress the movement as was done in the United States. Therefore, it can only be hoped that the youth uprising in Egypt, as is hope for disenfranchised youth in America, to build a popular mass movement that will not be satisfied with the regime change, or as here with the election of a black president. In closing, permit me to say I am inspired by the youth of Egypt, Tunisia, and Palestine. The struggle is hard and arduous, but from generation to generation, our victory is certain. Rise up, young people, rise up. Your future is calling you. February 8, 2011. Jalil Mutakim. Thank you.
Wow.